So, video blog. I was just looking up some numbers, and 31% of black people have a form of STI. That means, and they're only 12.6% of the population, so 3 out of 7 black people have some form of sexually transmitted disease. But the thing is, all those black churches, all those black people around other black people, means they are at high risk when they gather together in groups. Their own population, when they gather together in groups, 3 out of every 10, 30 out of every 100 have sexually transmitted diseases. So it makes, when black people gather together, it makes their gatherings extremely high risk gatherings. So if they don't address these issues in their community, they're nuts. Because it makes their social gatherings unbelievably dangerous. To go to church as a black person, going to a church of all black people makes it very dangerous. So I don't get it. All those black HBUs, that makes going on campus to those schools very dangerous. So again, I don't understand why wouldn't they be getting to be an extremely conservative people? Instead, they're like maniacs. And that means when they, all those gunshots and that means there's tainted blood flying through the air. And that means when they have to go help somebody with a gunshot, that their blood is carrying these infectious diseases, making them very risky to help. Truly making them very risky to want to save. And I don't understand why they wouldn't be addressing this within their community. This is a unbelievable hazard to each other. So why wouldn't they be doing it? And they need safety precautions, because if they're going to save each other, giving them CPR and other things in their own community, they need to be more cautious with each other so they don't continue the spread. So it's not like they can't help, but they have to be more prepared. They have to take training in elementary school and high school, how to prevent sexually transmitted diseases, how to prevent, contracting them. So I don't get it. I don't get Mayor Brandon Johnson in that. And that means it protects all the other communities, because you take the population that has the highest rate of infection, and if you can bring that down, and you're working on the other ones that have low rates of infection, you can bring them down by addressing the ones with the highest rate of infection, bringing it down, and the lower rates have less exposure, and they will go down. And it will be a positive trend downward. So you have all the black bums on the street of Chicago, and the statistics, It doesn't make you want to interact with a black fucking bum, because they will have high rates of exposure. And especially being on the street and in pollution, as I've told them, it suppresses their immune system, so it makes them have higher colonization, and it makes it easier for them to spread. So I don't get it. As I said, on the south side, they would be cleaning up their environment. I went down there and spent decades and decades and decades, numerous decades, not 2 decades, numerous decades cleaning up down there, and they weren't. And I kept on talking to the people who do real estate and everything else. Why the fuck aren't you cleaning up your neighborhoods? Why the fuck aren't you doing beautification? Why the fuck aren't you taking down the abandoned structures? If you're not going to rehab them, take them down. Make them vacant lots. Plant greenery. My one client, she's done this in the suburbs. In her suburb that's on the west, it's an all-black suburb. They started tearing down abandoned houses. Truly, recapturing the wood, the brick, the material, and everything else, and just making them lots, and then planting urban gardens on those lots. That's what she was doing. I forget the suburb. But they were, and so that makes the existing structures more valuable, because there's fewer properties that are on, because they can't buy something and rehab it because it doesn't exist anymore. And it's much more expensive to build from scratch. And so rehabbing, why it got so popular, because it's cheap. But if you take that property off the market by removing it, and then you create a green space, then there's fewer houses available, and those prices of the remaining houses go up in value. So that was one way that she was increasing property values and improving the quality of the air and doing mitigation in the soil. Truly, planting stuff that helps rejuvenate and take out any toxins, any environmental hazards in the soil, making her suburban community better. And it was an all black, and I don't know if it wasn't Harvey, I don't think, but it could have been. But again, why isn't this being done in Gary and everything else? And so again, you don't have the crack houses and everything else because they don't exist. People can't squat. And so it really forces urban renewal. So I don't get it with black people. I truly don't. It frustrates the shit out of me. And, you know, I like Shaq. I like Kenny. I hung around Charles and had great times. I used to have a lot of black friends, but they're at risk hanging around other black people. So they have to understand that their community is a higher risk community. And I don't think, you know, Charles and any of them want to contract any contagious diseases, especially because all of them are older, making it harder to deal with and harder to overcome. So you think they would be trickling on down to their own community as leaders, and they should be leaders in black community. I would like Charles to run for office in that. I mean, truly, they can be leaders in communities, and they would run in black communities and help improve the communities. They have great networks, and they do. They have great networks. They are very influential. They can bring business opportunities and everything else. So they can change it from negative to positive. And they have their own seed capital. And they can pay for their own elections. They don't have to raise campaign money. They get government match for every dollar they spend. So they can like Ross Perot. He just self-financed. He gets $1. He gets a government match. I used to give it on my tax return. Every year, I donated to the government pool for campaign money. So they don't have to go out there and raise, and now they can use smart social media, Facebook, and other things, and be even smarter with their capital and be more lean and mean in how they use their advertising. So they get the match, and then they get lean and mean at how they target in place, and they can run very effective campaigns, all three of them, Kenny, Charles, and Shaq. I don't know where they reside. But again, changing things, and the knock-on effect will be positive to all the other communities. As they trend down, others will trend down, and we will get a safer overall. But it's pretty frustrating. So, there has to be some kind of evolution and revolution. So the future doesn't keep on trending sicker. Yeah, Todd loved to hang out. That was his place. My friend T. Roar used to love to hang out. I've been in there a few times. They had a good time. But again, I don't understand. Jesse Jackson I've never heard him speak about dealing with disease issues in his Operation Push, Operation Breadbasket. Well, one of the things being sickly, it takes away your ability to have higher energy. You get more chronic fatigue and everything else, and it makes you much less productive. Are they going or not going? So again, that brings down their ability to have energy to be highly productive people. So it literally drains their ability to earn money out of the community at that rate. It drains money out of the community because communities that are healthier, like Japan and others, tend to have higher wages because the population can sustain a high rate of productivity. Truly, that's why China is better than India. And I'll put it on Tumblr, but they're just a healthier population. And with a healthier population, and also China has a closer standard deviation than India in IQ. China has a lower variation or lower standard deviation in IQ, where India has a much wider spread in IQ capability, and also they have higher rates of illness than in China. And that's why China is the number 2 economy and India is way down in comparison to its size. Per capita, It's extremely poor. And so they have this huge spread, and a lot of it deals with not addressing, like President Xi addresses pollution issues and many of the other issues, but the leader Modi in India, he wasn't like a Nazi on government corruption. That finds the money to take care of the pollution issues. That's why Ping, the first thing he did to find the money for the other initiatives, and why did he do it? He was afraid of the collapse of the Communist Party. Truly, he was afraid of the collapse of the Communist Party. And to improve and strengthen, first thing he had to do is cleanse the system. And once he got rid of the corruption, that means the flow into the government went up substantially, and that gave him the money to address other issues, from poverty, healthcare, pollution, and many other issues. So he did it right. He realized corruption, if I can wipe that the fuck out, the coffers of the government will fill immensely with money, and then I can take all that newfound wealth and address the pollution and other issues and improve overall China. Now, who did the right thing at the beginning? President Trump. What did he say? He was going to drain the swamp, get rid of federal, state, county, and local corruption. So Trump and Ping were on the same page. But the thing is, in communism, he is a king. He doesn't need the Chinese Communist Party to vote his way. It's a little bit different in leadership there. He mandates. And if people don't like it, he just kills them. So it's a little bit different in how it's implemented. Why do you think Macau took a huge hit? They lost 30 to 40% of their revenue because all those Chinese politicians were running scared. It wasn't like they were going to go to court and the court was going to side with them. He tells them, convict them and fucking execute them. And what do? They convict them and they execute them. As I watched with the British businessman and that military general, I think, in the Chinese army, and she was connected. Basically, she went to jail for life, and I don't know, he disappeared? But it's a different way of operating. Here, there's a lot of red tape. Over there, things go really quick, and if you disagree, you just get eliminated. So it's very effective when you get a good leader. Things move very swiftly. And resistance, there isn't. But both of them were on the same page. To fill the coffers, my friend Dean went to India. He couldn't believe they have dark money and light money. And dark money is the corruption, I think. And so it's white and black money, they call it. I forget, Dean told me. But the corruption was immense. And if they didn't have it, they could fill the coffers in India and address their issues. All that money would rain into the government, and that means getting rid of the black markets. Because all that stuff in the black markets, just like in China, they don't pay taxes. And so that means the government doesn't get money on all that illegal drug trade. Truly, like here, Al Capone was busted on racketeering and all that, tax fraud. And the thing is, the government they don't declare the money, so the government doesn't get any tax dollars. And so you clean up these systems, and all of a sudden, the government, you're going to legal alternatives like beer as a legal alternative. And so if somebody wants to go out and put one on, they got to go out and get a beer. And now we have Uber and Lyft and so on and so forth. But that means the liquor industry rises in profitability because they take out the other industries. And I watched all those people spending hundreds of dollars on, 8 balls and, a half an 8 ball and that. And they're not buying liquor at the club. They're buying cocaine, which the club has nothing to do with. And they're not popping bottles. They're popping lines. So the club doesn't get any of that money. So that means you're not going to 7-Eleven and grabbing a case of beer. You're grabbing some crack cocaine. So liquor stores in that were, my nephew Ryan, in those areas, they were having problems. People weren't buying their booze and that. They were buying the crack and everything in Detroit. And so Hennessy and sales and all that suffered. So it's a crowding out effect. All that money went into that. And then they have to pay for higher protection and everything else in the stores. They got to get gated this, gated that. And it makes making money as a small business unfucking believably hard. And it makes it very risky because they come into the store and they steal and they rob you. They're not in there to buy anything. And so, again, I'm not saying that we have to go that. I'm saying that we have to find a more effective system within our system to implement things quickly, to be able to cut through the red tape and make the rubber hit the road quick and effectively, efficiently. So again, all that money would flow into our government, and you would have money to address all kinds of issues, because it wouldn't be flowing to El Chapo, who was a multi-billionaire, or Pablo Escobar. I think he was worth, I don't know how many billions. So that money didn't go into the Colombian government. And so it didn't go into the investment community, because I showed you all the cash houses. So it wasn't put in banks. Truly, money laundering was just a fraction of it. Most of the money was sitting in all these cash houses, which I showed you. They had so much money, it was stuffed in all the walls, under the floors, in the attics. Unbelievably. Just sitting there, doing nothing. And as the Bible says, that's the most wicked thing of all. So it wasn't propping up community banks or anything else. It was just sitting in storage. Like there's a guy in Chicago area, he owned a bunch of adult entertainment places. He had $10 million in cash in his warehouse. It wasn't doing anything but losing money from inflation. He's an idiot. Truly, he's not financially smart. He was a moron. Putting that money in the bank and everything and investing it properly, he would have made out like a bandit. Taxes was his least of his worries. Meaning, as I told my clients, we can make you money, and taxes on this, when you're doing this, is a good thing. You should be jumping for joy. You just made a shitload of money. And yeah, they take a cut of it, but you're left with a shitload of money. You stick it in a hole, and it loses via inflation. And you're losing money every year, and you're not making more money. You're just purely going down. So again, he was a moron. That money would have been great to invest. He just has bad financial advisors. Thinking that doing it his way, no, that's not at all. You got good accountants, good estate planners, and everything else. You set up the right corporations. You set up entities. You can donate to charity. There's many ways to mitigate taxes. Truly. So putting that money to productive use, money makes money when it's invested correctly. So again, doing it all wrong, and this would bring all kinds of money into the city of Chicago, Cook County, the state. And so Trump was right. Draining the swamp would cause a flow of money into the government like never before, out of all those cash houses and everything. And it would be generating incredible amount. The velocity of money, when it's sitting in those houses, you know the velocity of money is 0. And when you increase the velocity of money because you can lend it out and invest it, the velocity of money is a magnifier, as banks do. They leverage their capital. And so a little bit of money is turned into a lot of money through the multiplier effect. And when it's sitting in the cash houses, it's doing nothing but losing through inflation. It's not multiplying, but when you deposit it in a bank, in a savings account or checking, it becomes a multiplying effect on the community. A positive thing. So stuffing it under your mattress, it should never be there. So the story in the Bible of the 3 servants should tell you. It tells you exactly what to do with your money. Invest it wisely. And if not, you're satanic. So again, Ping and Trump started off right. But the thing is, Ping can be very heavy-handed. Trump didn't have that kind of power. But India is fucked. They didn't implement the same thing. And they have to. Because that gets them all the money to address the diseases and the infrastructure and everything else. So you got to root out the corruption in all forms. internal within the government and all other systems. You need to purify. You need to sanctify. That means becoming righteous and just. I'm down here in the financial district. They lose big with all this corruption. This money doesn't flow through the system. That means stockbrokers lose their money. They don't get the trades and everything else. Financial planners don't make money. People who sell life insurance, annuities, and everything else don't make money. And no, they don't buy liability insurance. So the property casualty companies don't make money. The cartels don't buy any form of insurance. They're not a proper business. They don't buy options and they don't buy property insurance. They don't buy any form of liability. Truly, they don't buy terrorist organizations. They don't buy, commercial auto insurance. All those trucks and that they use aren't insured. So they don't expand the insurance world. They don't expand the financial world. They move the money underneath. So all those terrorist organizations deprive their communities of the financial capabilities that legitimizing the money and moving through the correct systems and moving in with a traditional National Guard and military and everything else through legitimate systems, and then they pay their people benefit. All those people that work for the terrorist organizations, they don't get retirement plans, they don't get disability plans, they don't get medical insurance, they don't get dental insurance. Tell that to a terrorist. That all those people working for bin Laden, what did they get when they got injured? They suffered and died. Or when they were working for ISIS, they didn't get any benefits. There wasn't any retirement plan or disability benefit or life insurance for, their next of kin. So if you start telling this to criminals and they start realizing that, wow, it really isn't all it's made out to be that we see in the movies. All this bling and all this greatness. No. You're on the edge of losing everything all the time, including your life. So, I don't get it. And talking to these organizations like Al-Qaeda and many others, why don't they just lay out to their members the lack of benefits? Truly. Enlighten them to the lack of benefits. And how you get shot, you're going to suffer and more likely bleed out and die. Where other people, they're going to get rushed to the hospital, patched up, healed, and, they get disability benefits and other things. They can sue for injuries. A terrorist can't sue for an injury. Neither can any illegal sue for an injury. Truly. So, they have no ramifications in court? Meaning they can't say, oh, that weapon blew up in my face and I'm going to sue Smith & Wesson for a dysfunctional, but they can in the military. If that grenade doesn't go off correctly and it malfunctions, that's a liability claim. And they can sue the manufacturer of the grenade. Or if the missile doesn't go off, meaning they shoot the missile and it doesn't blow up, they can sue the manufacturer of the missile for the malfunction. So they can, if a Tomahawk doesn't do what it's supposed to do, they can sue Raytheon for its malfunction. So the military has recourse against their manufacturers, but terrorists don't. They don't have any form of recourse. So again, criminals are morons. But once they get financial literacy, they would understand the value proposition. They didn't tell this to the mafiosa. And one of their retirement plans is a bullet in the head. The military, you get pension and everything else when you leave. Their retirement plan is a bullet in the head. So when you start explaining this to them and enlightening them, and Muslim clerics get up there and tell the truth of this and do an exercise in financial literacy, then they can see what a jeopardy it is to support this type of movement, and how to do things correctly through your government structure. Look at Miss Park. In order to live, her father, because of her illegal business, he had no protection, and he suffered and died. And the family, there was no business interruption insurance or anything else, and everything was taken away, and eventually they were forced out of North Korea because of the illegal business dealings of her father, bringing great tragedy onto the family. And there was no protection for her. There was no bank accounts. They seized the bank accounts. They seized the assets. And the family was left starving. So Ms. Park should understand this. She needs an education in financial literacy. How her father brought incredible shame and harm on the family and jeopardized everything. And I understand her feeling, but her father brought it on them all, including himself. He should have looked for legal means of making a living. So she needs to talk about that in her book. How her father destroyed the family, and how they suffered immensely for her father's poor decisions, and how it ended up in her father suffering in prison and then dying shortly after he got out of prison. So it brought great harm upon him. So there's a lot that she can talk about with that book that makes practical sense, and she can preach. Do not get into illegal businesses. Get into legitimate structures and all the risk to the family and your friends and your community. So she can preach this and help reform things and help people truly choose to make legitimate paths in life, and how the legitimate path is supposed to protect you. That's why the Bible says the righteous man has nothing to worry about. But you fucked the system of the Bible by making me have to worry about shit. I shouldn't have to worry about anything. My cup floats over. You need to die. Real quick. So I don't get it. That's why the Bible is all about a righteous economy. And the righteous man has nothing to fear, because all those that are unrighteous are supposed to be put to death. That's what Revelations tells you. So if an unrighteous piece of crap comes at you, you drop the motherfucker. That's where they belong, 10 feet under. The dirtbag that they are. Why should they threaten your life as a righteous person? Ask Shaq. If a black guy came up to him with a gun, would he blow their fucking brains out? Truly, if it came down to him or him. I don't think Shaq or Charles or Kenny would fucking hesitate in blowing their brains out. Take my life, you piece of fucking shit. I'm going to put you to waste. So that's why the Bible says the righteous man has nothing to fear. And you make me like I should have something to fear. I should have nothing to fear. And if I fear, you die. And that's what should happen. So the only one that should fear is you, the unfucking righteous. You should be cowering where you belong. You're pieces of fucking garbage. Either you reform or you die. And I have, like my friend Michael Kang talking about, like in China, they'll blow your brains out right there on the sidewalk and move on. They broke into his car. So, you talking me, they were preaching all this. They broke into his car, stole this shit. He's poor. He went to law school. He's struggling after he got out of law school, just trying to make a living. And they fucking break into his car. He asked for the videotape from the place. I was helping him.